We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Yes, I did watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. Tom's camera just switched on us again and then switched back. I don't know what's going on YouTube
going on
with Tom's camera, but hopefully, whatever. If it goes to the other camera, so what? You're still on camera. We'll be okay. But anyway, yes, I'll give exceedingly brief impressions of that. But we have many other things to cover.
4-hour, 2-minute movie. You're going to have to be a little bit verbose about it. I mean, there's just a lot to talk about.
No, I'm not giving a full review by any means. Do you want me to hop into it right away and get it out of the way?
Let's get this thing started.
Let's start.
Let's start. Yeah. So this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to avrant.com. Leave us a comment, facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant. Contact us directly, Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom, but if you want your question answered, question@avrant.com.
Yes, please.
That's the only way. The rest of the ways are ways that we may or may not, like I know somebody hit us up on Facebook this week, and I was like...
I did put it on the list.
Did you? Okay. Well, that's by Rob's good graces that happened, because I saw it and I was in the middle of something, and then I was going to hit up Rob to say, hey.
I mean, I could have replied on Facebook and said, please send this to the email, but I'm like, whatever, it's here. The photos are already here. That's all right. We'll put it on the list.
All right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you have to support this podcast in one way. One of the ways you can do that is becoming a patron over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you become a subscribing, supporting member of our community. Every month, Patreon will take some money from you and give most of it to us. We have 124 patrons right now, so thank you to all of our patrons.
For sure. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast. For anyone who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, you say the amount, it'll automatically be taken from you and given to us every month if you hang on to that subscription there, that Patreonage. So 124 patrons over there, and thank you all very much for continuing to support AVRant. Very nice.
If you're looking at the YouTube video, I'm not drinking beer, even though the cup does say beer on it. It is Coke Zero.
Caffeinated.
Things get caffeinated. That's right. We've got some notes of gratitude for some of our listeners. We've got Mark, Zack, David, who says we brought him back from the brink of audiophile madness when he started listening to us 7 years ago. And Dylan. So Mark, Zack, David, and Dylan, thank you very much for sending those notes of gratitude in.
Yes, indeed. Mark, Zack, David, and Dylan, thank you very much for the notes of gratitude for us keeping the podcast going. I mean, we should be all right now. Light at the end of the tunnel. Let's hope. Let's hang on for dear life, quite literally. But yes, the notes of appreciation are very much appreciated by us. So thank you to everyone who continues to listen and send in your questions.
That's right. My wife is just getting crazy about vaccines. So we spent the weekend standing in lines that we weren't really supposed to be in so that she could get turned away and we could get turned away. But they're down to 50 here. So 50 years old or older.
As far as like booking your appointments.
We are 49.
Indeed.
Both of us. She will turn 50 in May. So she's now suddenly looking forward to her birthday. So that's exciting for her. But I don't till October, but they'll probably lower it before we get there anyways, but that's just what it is. So yes, we are light at the end of the tunnel land, and pretty soon we will say go out and listen to something again.
Getting there.
But let's start with Rob talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League, better than the other one, therefore we all love it movie, even though it's still probably not very good because I didn't see it. We'll have to see what Rob says. Rob, what do you say?
Yeah, so I don't know. I seem to be in the minority. It seems like a lot of people really, really loved it, and I'm happy. I'm happy that people really, really loved it. That is great. I didn't really, really love it. I didn't hate it. I'm pretty down the middle of the road of it. My big take on it is I think I probably took too much English lit in high school and university. So, I know the rules of storytelling. And I'm fine with people who know the rules so well that they decide to break them in effective ways. That is something that if you are a true auteur you can do. But no, this is a movie that I felt like had some really excellent components, some really great parts. It just wasn't assembled in the correct order. Like, honestly, that's my take. And that applies mostly to the first half of the movie, less so to the second half, which is more linear. Once the team is together, then it basically just plays out. So that second half is a lot less jumbled. But the first half, I'm like, why is this just a jumble of scenes? And what actually frustrated me most...
4 hours of movie, and he wanted to use all his shots.
I know, but I mean, what frustrated me most is that if I took the shots, I'm like, there are thematic through lines here. There are character parallels here. You just didn't bother to put them side by side in the editing so that actually makes sense. And like, when you change a scene, it shouldn't just because, well, we ran out of film for that scene, so now we go to this scene. Like, there should be a reason to go to the next scene. And there could, like, what annoyed me while watching it was me thinking there could have been, like, if you took this scene that happened, 30 minutes later and just moved it over here, it actually would have worked a lot better. And I'm not even talking about tossing scenes out or changing what was done or altering the story in any way. Literally just the order in which the scenes were edited together would have made a big difference. Now, I'm completely willing to believe that we know this thing was assembled in a massive hurry. There were some people on Twitter who worked on it who were like, I haven't even seen it yet because, like, the way we worked on this thing was so under the gun. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe scenes came in, they scored them right away, and they're just like, yeah, just throw it on there because just throw it on the Avid editor because we got no time.
That seems silly.
And I'm like, if that was the case, I'm willing to believe it. But anyway, I think there is a better movie contained within Zack Snyder's Justice League without actually changing much of anything. Now, in terms of if you're looking at going from Man of Steel to Batman v Superman to Justice League, this is obviously much closer in tone and makes much more sense as a follow-up to those two movies than the Joss Whedon version. That is unquestionable. The things that Tom said about the Joss Whedon version of Justice League on Brightside Home Theater about, just the look, the cinematography, how everything was brightened up, and the
tone,
costumes.
the tone completely changed from like this is a Joss scene,
right?
This one is not.
So all of those things corrected. So I mean, if that was your biggest gripe, yes, you'll be very happy that those things are corrected. I still didn't think it was a great movie. I don't personally like these versions of the DC superheroes, which, I mean, that's a personal preference thing. So that doesn't make me right or wrong. I think Zack Snyder's take on the heroes only works if you were thinking along the lines of, I'm bored with the traditional take on the heroes. I want to see them do something different and opposite, which, like, but if this is your introduction to Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, then I don't like the dark, we kill everybody we meet and we don't care about anybody we save.
Yeah, we don't care about we don't care about bystanders or like collateral damage.
I just don't like a dour Superman who spends, every waking moment just feeling sorry for himself. I don't like that. I like a tries to do everything right Superman. So I prefer Superman and Lois on the CW. I will be happily watching that. And that's my take on Justice League. Let's not waste any more time.
Well, I will tell you my one thing I believe that they did wrong was I honestly, like, I said this on the Brightside podcast with whatever his name is, and
nice
that guy, whatever. He's very forgettable. It's hard. I said, I didn't really. I don't agree with Zack Snyder's take. Sure. I don't think he's coming at it from a disingenuous place. I think he honestly is trying to represent these characters in the way that he believes is true to them. I believe that they should have given the entire thing to somebody else, then they should have hired Zack Snyder like 5 years later and said, "You're gonna make, Batman, Superman dark and Batman dark and Justice League dark." You know what I mean? So that we've already had like the characters. Now we're going to see them in a new way.
Right.
And if you had done that, then he could have taken it even further, which is I think what he really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then not have to have shoehorned in so much Martha crap in there.
This was better than Batman v Superman. I was very worried that this being Zack Snyder's vision, that it was going to be as bad. Like, that was just a bad movie. And I mean, it seems as though this many years later, people have forgotten that the reason Justice League largely got changed is because the reaction to Batman v Superman was so negative at the time, and how that
forget that.
That turned around.
that movie was just like, people walked out of that movie and were like, what did I just watch?
Exactly.
Why? Like, people who have never liked writing or reading or anything out walked out and said, no one talks this way. What are you talking about? What is happening in this movie? It makes no sense.
But yes, with my English lit thing, I actually like almost all Zack Snyder movies. The opening, which of course is in slow motion, as almost all of this movie is.
Right.
Why Lois Lane picking up some coffee cups need to be shot at 3,600 frames a second. I'm not quite sure, but the idea that we're opening with the bell has been rung, which is Superman's death scream, right? Like, and the visual of that and the symbolism of that, I'm like, oh, there's. Again, if you just reassembled the order, like, so much could have been done of this is a story that emanates outward from Superman and then collapses back into Superman by the end of it. I'm like, that is all there. Wasn't told that way, unfortunately, and I really think it could have, because all the pieces exist.
I do believe that Zack Snyder is a very, very good storyteller and visual storyteller. Yeah. And cinematographer and director. I think he's fantastic. I really think he needs to pair himself up with a very good writer, because he cannot.
This desperately needed a good story editor, is what it did. Like, the person who could say, oh, hey, these two scenes would work so much better if they were side by side, or if there were a scene in between these two scenes. This could work so much. That's all that needed to be done.
And the way that things work in Hollywood too often is that people become so powerful, if you want to say, that they just that they start to be able to call their own shots. People are like, well, you've made so many good movies in the past, so surely you can make more. Well, you made good movies in the past because people forced you to
there
work
were restrictions
with, they forced you to work with good writers and other people, and now you're not restricted to that, and you're going to make everything you want the way you want, and everybody's like, but who wrote this? Oh yeah, I wrote it. Okay, whatever. All right. On the other side of reviews here, I got my panels from my acoustic art panels from GiK this week. You will see a review on AV Gadgets when I publish it. Okay. I wrote it yesterday, but excuse me when I publish it. And there will be a lot of me saying excuse me because I'm drinking soda and it's going to make me burp. But overall, pleased with the purchase. That's what I'll say to start with. If you, like everybody else who has talked about these things, if you're looking for a one-to-one color representation from the image to what you get, it's going to be very hard for you to be happy.
This ain't it.
This ain't it. Yeah. So now I took pictures, and I took pictures of one of the panels, and I put it next to in the review next to the original art, and it looks just like terrible. Comparison to each other. It just looks awful. But in real life, it doesn't look that bad. Like, I put the three, like I put the what was on my computer screen, and then the actual panel next to it, and I asked my wife to come over. I know the wife thing is so played, but whatever. And I'm like, these are not the same, right? She's like, oh no, this one doesn't look as bad as what I'm seeing on the screen. I'm like, okay, I'm just making sure I'm not like putting my own self in there. So the color of the original, at least the way it looks, because I don't have the original. I have a PDF of the original, I have a photograph of the original. So there's all that goes into it too.
There's what the camera was doing color wise, and then what the computer did color wise to it, and
what my monitor settings do color wise to it. So the way I see it is a very blood red image, and when the picture I took that I put next to it looks completely washed out, like it just is completely washed out. But the actual panel, it looks more gray than brown in the background, which it was my first complaint. But the red is more of a brick instead of a blood, so it's a little bit more faded. But what I was concerned about and did not play out was that it was going to be more like pointillism. Like it almost looked pixelated. If you know what pointillism is when you take a pencil or a pen and you just make dots, and the closer the dots, the deeper the color, and the further away the dots, the lighter the color, or it's usually black and white, but so it's just gray tones. But I was afraid it was going to look almost pixelated in that way, but it's not. It looks very good. It's just the colors aren't exactly right. But again, I can't really. Yeah,
that's something that perhaps manipulating in the software before sending them the digital version of the image. That there's probably a whole bunch of translations going on that could potentially be like you could compensate for ahead of time if you knew.
Especially with the time that it took for them to get them to me, I would have liked to have seen like
Right.
you know,
Production sample.
Something.
Yeah.
Something, because I don't think it really anyways. And there are quite a bit. So you can get so it's 2x2 panel. 2x2 inches, and you can get a box of those, a box of 6 from GiK for $225. But a single printed panel is $125.
Right.
So I mean, it's an extreme premium, but it's not out of line with what you can get anywhere else.
Indeed.
Like if you go over there and look and try to find one that's cheaper, you really can't. But you can find some that are more expensive. So you have to kind of take it at your you kind of take what you get, kind of thing. Okay. So I don't know. I'm overall pleased, but we're going to see the review. It's a generally positive review, but it's honest too. It just these colors are not the same.
Right.
I mean, at least not from what I can see.
Now, was there something about the back of the panel?
Oh, right. So what I was expecting is what I have in my own panels, which is either an air gap, like a wooden frame with an air gap, or like the insulation coming straight to the back of the panel.
Yeah.
Which would have been fine either way. And usually they would put some sort of fabric or like cotton padding over it, just because people are neurotic about fiberglass, whatever. But what they did is they put a piece of particle board back there, and that kind of irritated me because I was like,
now, the thing is, like, GiK offers some different options because there's different thicknesses.
Right.
And then one of the options is to basically make it like a 242 panel, which would have the air gap and would have the open back. So if you must have just selected the regular 2-inch panel.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Okay.
The regular 2-inch panel. So I was surprised that there was a piece of particle board back there. I was also surprised that there wasn't any sort of hanging system that was included, which I kind of assumed there would be something back there. So that was a little weird, I thought, that they didn't include that, because that seems like a no-brainer. You just, I mean, it's a couple of dollars worth of materials.
A couple of Z-clips is all you need.
Oh, Z-clips, or just some wire and a couple of those little D rings in order to hang it, which is how I'm going to hang it.
Okay.
But I was a little surprised by that. But otherwise, I mean, fine, whatever. That's the way they do it. I would have just liked to have known that that's what I was going to get. Or had the option, do you want to close back or open back? I would have said open. Excuse me. In the news, SVS product announcement that Gary Cuban teased on our podcast a couple of weeks ago took place, and we were wrong.
Yeah.
It's a new subwoofer.
It is a new subwoofer.
I did not guess that.
We didn't guess it because he said the words, we make things other than subwoofers. Although, to be fair, I think that he was talking about the specific thing when he mentioned that like Smith, their product designer, had sent him a prototype of something. So I think the next new product is not a subwoofer. This one that was announced this week was a new subwoofer.
Yeah. So it's called the 3000 Micro. It uses dual opposed 8-inch drivers, which are active and in phase, with a modified version of the 800-watt 3000 series amp, which is why it's in the 3000 series. It's because of the amp.
That's right.
It's all packed into the smallest subwoofer cabinet the SVS has ever offered. It's basically an 11-inch cube. Comes in either piano black gloss or white gloss for $800, which is the same price as the SP 2000 Pro in the normal black ash finish. Mm-hmm. So, $800.
That's right.
Going by the specs, it should be able to play a little bit louder than the SP 1000 Pro, but not quite as deep, with its -3 at either 23 or 24 hertz, depending on where you found that spec.
I mean, so on their website itself, they say 23, so I'm going to go by that.
In the press release, it's 24.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's in that range. A little above 20. That's the point.
I do not understand why they cannot get that. And it's not just them, it's everybody. No one gets that right. So it's the SP 1000 Pro and the SP 2000 both hit lower, 20 hertz or lower. The SP 2000 Pro should slightly outperform as far as loudness based on their own measurements, which admittedly are not... if you look at the measurements, they say this is not the full output that this thing, but they must have measured them in a similar way. So the graphs almost look the same height wise, which means that they're playing the same volume about. But the SP 2000 Pro is just a little bit louder, and it goes quite a bit lower. So this is really all about the physical size of the cabinet: 11-inch cube versus a 15-inch cube for the SP 2000 Pro. Or a 13.5-inch cube in the case of the SP 1000 Pro. So basically, if you think about this, a 3000 micro is a smaller version of the SB2000 Pro that doesn't play it doesn't play quite as low, but it's quite a bit smaller. But it'll give you the same output. So whatever room you would have put the SB2000 Pro in, you can put this one in, and it'll take up less floor space.
Yeah.
Now you're going to lose a little bit on the bottom end, but I don't think you're really going to notice it for the most part. So the SVS smartphone app with two-way Bluetooth communication is on board, and we have to get a shout out to Byron, who alerted us on Twitter to check out the augmented reality view in your space option on each of SVS's product pages. It's a great way to visualize any SVS product in your own room ahead of time. Now we just need the SVS to make an option that shows each product as a virtual cardboard box. Yeah, so yeah, he showed how how it would look in your room, sort of based on the augmented reality looking through your camera on your phone.
It's cool. I like that. Yeah. It is helpful for visualization. So yes, micro 3000, a 3000 micro, that's within their $800. And if you needed something real small, an 11-inch cube, then SVS now has an offering for you.
I actually, and we were talking about this beforehand, I don't think Rob agrees, but I think this price is very, very, very attractive. For $800, there's not a lot of 11-inch cubes out there that will get this loud.
Yeah.
So, we always say you can go low / loud, you can go small, or you can go cheap. Pick two. Yes. But this one sort of balances that equation just about as finely as you can to get a pretty low price, a pretty low output, extension, and a pretty small box.
Right.
All in the same.
I think it's because in a way SVS did such a good job with that 1000 Pro. That it's a little bit bigger, but it's a 13.5-inch cube versus an 11 cube. I mean, for some people, that will be the deciding factor. But I'm like, 13.5-inch cubes, pretty reasonably small.
This is going to sell like hotcakes over in Europe, dude. And you can tell just by the fact that they don't even offer the black ash.
Right.
They are gearing this directly for people in small Scandinavian apartments.
Yeah.
Where they have very little floor space and every inch makes a difference. This is 100% going to sell.
The other thing is that dual opposed design that should help to mitigate physical vibration. Not 100%, but to some degree. So whereas with a 1000 Pro, you can see that woofer moving. That thing has some good excursion on it, and so that you're going to want to isolate. This one, you're still going to want to isolate ideally, but it's not going to be quite as bad with that dual opposed design. So there's
it's not compatible with the SoundPath isolation feed I asked.
Right.
So you cannot use those. You'll have to come up with another way of eliminating that rattle, which there is an article for that on my website. So check that out. But Rob's right, and they were telling me too. They're like, oh, you can put a quarter on the thing, and the quarter won't even move. I'm like, yeah, but there's still vibrations, dude. I'm sorry, they still exist. One thing that is kind of cool, and I guess you can't really see it because it has metal grates on it. I'm not sure how easy it is for those metal grates to come off, but the surround on both those drivers is concave instead of convex.
Okay, yeah.
Which is kind of, it's very unique looking. I don't think that functionally it makes that much difference, but it's very unique looking.
I think it was literally because of the excursion of the drivers.
Yeah.
That if those grills had been completely flat to the sides or had curved inward, that the driver would have physically touched them as it moves its way out. So
So it's very interesting. All right, Xbox insiders in the alpha ring, this is testing the earliest, potentially buggiest firmware releases, which is, I think, all of us, can now play games in Dolby Vision. Microsoft promised that Dolby Vision support for games would arrive sometime in 2021. So, they've got a couple of months left. So this is a promising sign. However, the early reports are that all HDR game content gets put into a Dolby Vision container, whether the game itself actually uses Dolby Vision or not. HDR10 games are tone mapped to 1250 nit cap, apparently. And the signal maxes out at 60 hertz at 422. So, yeah. Still a work in progress.
It definitely a work in progress. I can't imagine that when this comes out, that's still going to have all those restrictions on it, although if this is the way it has arrived, it's a little bit strange. It would seem weird that you can play your games in Dolby Vision, but only at 60 hertz, can't do 120 hertz. That would seem strange, especially if, the game isn't actually in Dolby Vision, but since you ticked the yes, support Dolby Vision in games checkmark box, it puts everything into a Dolby Vision container, whether you want it to or not. So we'll see. We'll see how much this changes, but regardless, it's a sign that it's on the way.
Right. Sony revealed the new Orb controllers for its future PlayStation VR upgrade. I guess update or whatever. New the version 2.
Yes.
The glowing ping pong balls and the external camera are gone, which is nice. Unsurprisingly, the Orb controllers borrow from the PS5 DualSense by having adaptive triggers and haptic feedback. And much like Oculus Quest, the future headset will have tracking cameras rather than having to have the cameras on camera facing you. It's also, this is not coming out for like a year at least.
It is. Sony has said it is not coming out in 2021, so it's 2022 at the earliest.
Right. They look very much like ski.
Right.
The plastic ski pole holders. Yeah. Which I actually like the way these things look. I think they look great. I don't mind it.
I think they're all right.
I think they're fine. I'm really enjoying the Oculus Quest. I think that's a really good system. This has got some like that. The adaptive triggers I really like on this idea. Where it gives you some pushback, some resistance while you're using it. So
and it can even do a like tension, click.
Right. Yeah. So there's it. I think that's going to make some differences for VR in how immersive it is. All right. Some comments from our listeners. Ken wanted to share the results of his theater build that utilized a whole bunch of our suggestions. He had installed 9 Ascend Acoustics HTM 200 SE speakers, 2 pairs of side surrounds, and 4 Boston Soundware 4.5 speakers on the ceiling for Atmos. That was before they ran out of them in accessories.
That's right.
Less.
Yep.
Dual PB1000 subs handle the bass, and it all sounds great, although he clearly notices the difference between the physical discs versus streaming, so that's a bit of a double-edged sword. His Denon X3700H powers 9 of the 11 speakers. He went through 2 Date and 2 channel amps, though, both of which had problems, so he ultimately returned those and went with an Audio Source Amp 100 instead, which has been better. The TV is 85-inch Sony X900H. They are still issues getting 4K 120 and Atmos audio all working at the same time from his Xbox Series X going through that Denon X3700H, so he plugged the Xbox straight into the TV and is relying on eARC. For the room itself, he's happy he went with Rob's suggestion to have symmetrical soffits on each side, even though there's nothing inside the soffit on the right. And he took our advice to just build a single riser at the back of the room and then use bar stools and a pub table behind the second row couch as a optional third row. That worked out really nicely, and he's proud of his results. And he says, thanks again for the help. So he's got a big TV. He's got 2.5 rows of seats. He's got soffits. He's got lights. It's kind of nice. It looks pretty good.
It's very nice. It looks really good. That 85-inch TV, honestly, doesn't look too small in there. It looks like a pretty reasonable size. So
that front row in particular looks good for that front row. The second row and third row, maybe not so much.
Oh, but it's really good. Once again, those Boston Soundwares, although you can't get them anymore, but bigger than you might have expected. They aren't as tiny as one might have imagined from the original photos. And he used Daz's recommendation as far as the wall mounts for those HTM 200 SE speakers. Those are the Video Secu side clamping wall mounts, and he just rotated the base around 180 degrees so that the clamps are towards the backs of the speakers instead of the fronts of the speakers, and that allows them to be mounted closer to the wall. So, right. It all worked out really well. Looks real nice. I bet it sounds fantastic in there.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the questions here. Bobby. Bobby says he still listens every week. He's been enjoying his 12x12 theater, 12 foot by 12 foot, not 12 inch, which is good. It'd be weird. He painted all the walls dark gray and the ceiling black, and now he has acoustic panels everywhere. Display-wise, he started with the 65-inch Vizio M series, and he added a 92-inch pull-down screen and an Epson 8350 projector. He's itching for a display upgrade now, 4K HDR and 128 hertz gaming, all the good stuff. At first, he was considering the Epson 5050 UB, but with its throw distance, he already be at its max with 92 inches. And then there's the BenQ HT 3550. It costs less and would allow him to go to a bigger screen size. But will he be happy with his black levels and HDR performance? We will never know. So the other option is to just upgrade his flat panel with the 85-inch options that don't cost any more than that Epson 5050 UB projector. That's barely any smaller than his current 92-inch screen. If he uses a stand, he could have the even larger field of view. The 85-inch Sony X900H and the 85-inch Vizio P Quantum X are both affordable, but then there's the 77-inch OLED. It's the smallest. It's a little bit more expensive. He's a little afraid of burn-in. But nothing else is going to have those black levels, right? So what do we say you should do? I think you should go with the OLED. And I say this only because if you're considering an OLED
right.
in this situation, it's almost certainly because you care so much about the video quality that right. you'll regret not getting it.
And if you
can
even though it's smaller. Put it onto like a 3-in-1 stand or even just a regular TV stand, and you use its actual stand there, or get one of those tabletop universal stands. You know, you can bring it physically closer to you, because right now, of course, he has his 65-inch mounted flat on the wall, and then he has a pull-down screen that comes down in front of it. Now, if you nix both of those and just have a 77-inch OLED on a TV stand, I mean, I don't think the 83-inch is going to be affordable, because that's going to be $6,000. So that is not in this same price class. But now the 77 inches are down to like $3,200, and that's getting darn close to the same price as these other options. I mean, you know me, I'm going to have to say that is the best image quality that you can possibly get. If you do put it on a stand and bring it a little closer to you, you don't have to sacrifice on the field of view. The only question is, like, that Vizio P Quantum X, the 85-inch for $2,500 at Costco right now, I mean, that is very compelling. It's, if you never look at it beside an OLED, you're not going to notice anything other than the blooming. The blooming is there sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the blooming is there. And if you are bothered whatsoever by the blooming, then you're going to see that, and you're not going to see it on the OLED. So let's see. If it were me, I would go with the OLED. I would move it closer to me, and I would go with the OLED. Once you get used to that, there's kind of no going back, and it has all the goodies. And if you're talking about the gaming goodies, that's as good as it gets, is an LG. And I would go ahead and get the C10. I know some people are getting all hyped up about the brand new G1, but that would cost you $1,500 more, and I just don't care about measuring a 10% window. That's not what I watch.
Right. I'm with you.
Okay.
Gurinder says, Audioholics has been posting an ongoing series on YouTube each week with Anthony Grimaldi, whatever. And they're covering room acoustics. One of the things Anthony has recommended and talked about is purposely having some asymmetry for the side wall treatment, specifically alternating absorption and diffusion along the side walls. But if there's an absorption panel on the left wall, then directly across from it on the right wall, put a diffusion panel instead. And then the next panel's down, you flip that diffusion panel, whatever. You got it. So what are our thoughts on his approach? I don't think it matters. Honestly, I don't think that. I think that so I cannot imagine a world in which this makes anything other than maybe a measurable difference. It could work. I mean, it's also hard to make that recommendation and then say, okay, also treat your first reflection points, because if your room is symmetrical and your speakers are symmetrically placed from the side walls, which they normally are in a dedicated home theater, then you would have absorption panels across from each other, guaranteed, almost guaranteed. And then what? Then on one side you put a diffusion next, and the other side you put another absorption right next to it. I mean, I think it's going to look funny to me. So
there's a little bit of that, yeah. Although you can get the fully cloth covered ones, so then you wouldn't really see it visually. I mean, I found a little bit interesting with him saying, because he was saying like, oh, if you just go back maybe 5 or 10 years, he might have suggested symmetrical placement, but then now he's more on board with this asymmetrical placement. I'm like, that is completely untrue, because PMI Acoustics was his company from God, I mean, that's 25, 30 years ago at this point, and PMI Acoustics always used to suggest this method of these alternating diffusion and absorption. So, I mean, maybe it was just figure of speech he was saying, but I'm like, no, you've been on board with this for a long time. And the thing is, he's not pulling it from nowhere. He's getting that primarily from Floyd Toole's advice. Now, Floyd Toole's advice is the one thing I always have to remind everybody is he was listening to everything in mono. Everything was mono testing because he was concerned with what can you detect and limiting variables so that you can measure what an audience is responding to and actually correlate that to a single change being made as opposed to the vast number of wave interactions that are happening once you have a stereo setup. So it kind of makes more sense that if all you're ever listening to is mono, that some asymmetry in the room might actually help you to better focus on just the differences that are coming from the speaker as opposed to anything that the room might be imparting to the sound. As soon as you go to stereo, I don't think this approach makes a ton of sense outside of a fairly large room. In a fairly large room, which, keep in mind, everything that Anthony Gramani designs starts at $300,000 and up. So he's dealing with larger rooms than a lot of us in this podcast. A lot of us are dealing with much smaller rooms. And once you get to much smaller rooms, you actually start getting into quite strong sidewall reflections. And some of the stuff that Floyd Toole talked about, I don't completely agree with this whole retain the first reflections, completely, because that was based on the idea of, well, the only speakers that are worth anything are ones that have exceedingly similar response both on and off axis. We're referring to somebody we talked about last week, the home theater guru. Like, I actually think his approach much more lines up with the things that I say, which is that as the room gets smaller and as you're dealing with speakers where maybe the off-axis response isn't identical to the on-axis, you kind of want to get rid of those first reflections, or at least, quiet them down. And I do agree with the idea that you, at the actual first reflection, so the left speaker to the left wall and the right speaker to the right wall, that primary first reflection, that treating as broad a range of frequencies as possible makes a lot of sense, which would mean you would actually go for a combo panel. At that particular spot, you would go for as thick as you can to get as much into the bass as you can, and a scatter plate on it so that it treats frequencies as high as possible as well. I'm pretty on board with that. And then I actually think what was mentioned, that the second reflections, which is like the right speaker to the left wall and the left speaker to the right wall, that absorption only at that point in a small room where it's actually going to have an effect makes sense, because you don't want your imaging any effect, where it's like what came from the left side of the room is actually reflecting off the right side wall. Just absorb that, just completely absorb that. But I mean, to me, combo panels all along the side wall, like, you kind of can't go wrong. So if we want to end up there, where we're like, okay, let's just take all the advice and amalgamate it and just end up with combo panels all along the front half of the side walls of your room, it kind of takes care of all of it. So yeah, that's my complete thoughts on that, Gurinder.
All right. So he says, if your theater recliners have high seat backs, how much does it affect your sense of immersion in the sound? Do high seat backs mess with the audio cues we're supposed to be hearing? No, high seat backs mess with the height at which you place your surround back speakers. That's what it messes with more than anything.
You don't think there's anything of the speakers coming from the front that are at ear height? If you got a high seat back, it's like having something of a wall right there behind your ears?
I mean, for the very highest frequencies, maybe. I don't think that it's making that much of an audible difference. No.
Okay.
No. That's what
I mean, I've seen the recommendation of, if at all possible, you go for low seat backs. So your head doesn't have a headrest and it's just sitting up there. You got your bobblehead up there so that you have clear line of sight.
Sounds extremely comfortable.
All around you.
That's exactly what I want in my home theater.
I mean, you're going to be...
is to have to sit erect the entire time with my back arched and my head supported by my neck instead of a seat back.
You're going to be the lone person in the middle of the Dolby diagram, sitting on a stool.
That's right. All the speakers facing you
with
directly.
With your back brace on so that nothing moves.
That's right. In your black contacts.
That's right.
So and wearing all black clothes. Mike will be moving to a new house. Really? Tell us all about your new house here. Everybody's got a new house. And we'll finally have a dedicated theater room, but the final dimensions and layout are still unknown. Okay. How? Sorry. be moving into it. He already has a set of 5 Wharfdale Diamond Series speakers that he really likes and doesn't plan to upgrade. He's pre-selling getting a pair of SVS subs, but he'll wait until he knows exactly how many cubic feet of air he's dealing with.
Good idea.
So where he'd like our help is with some in-ceiling or on-ceiling suggestions for Atmos speakers, a new AV receiver, and some TV options to keep in mind. He's keeping a spreadsheet and wants to keep an eye out for deals. He's got a total budget of about $6,000 for all of that. So that's in-ceiling or on-ceiling suggestions for Atmos, a new receiver, and some TV options for $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
But spending less, of course, would be totally fine. So what are some in-ceiling speakers to consider? Well, it's almost like I wrote an article about this just recently.
Now, I'm going to mention that as we're recording this, so this is not necessarily going to be the case whenever you happen to be listening to this, but as we're recording this, Best Buy is currently running a sale that they frequently run. So if this sale is not on right now, wait a bit because it'll probably come back. But they sell Sonance in-ceiling speakers, and right now the Mag 6 and Mag 7 are on sale for really good prices. $150 for a pair of the Mag 6s or $200 for a pair of the Mag 8s. I would definitely spend the $50 per pair for the optional back cans, the Sonance back cans. But if you go with the Mag 6s, that's $200 for a pair of speakers with back cans included. And those are going to pair up with almost anything you could please as far as Atmos goes. That's a real good choice. The other ones we always point to are over at Monoprice. The Alpha series, very, very affordable, and metal back cans available for those. So if the Sonance are not on sale and you can't wait, I would certainly look over there at Monoprice for in-ceiling speakers to perform as Atmos. And I go with the Alpha series in general.
Right. But he said on ceiling maybe as well. So
potentially. I mean, I don't have a fantastic go-to option these days. I wish I did. Right? We used to have the
cheap ones.
Yeah, we used to have the Little Birds, and then we used to have the Boston Soundwares. Both of those options are gone now. I don't have a fantastic. So in that case, I would be looking more at what speakers you already own, and is there something that kind of matches up with those that might work as an on-ceiling. Now he was doing Wharfdale, which I'm not familiar enough to know if they have any sort of characteristic sound to them. So
No,
I unfortunately I don't have a really good one to point you there because I'm just not sure if there's something I should be aware of that would make something better than another as far as on ceiling.
Right. You could, I don't know, I don't even know what they offer in their lines, to be honest with you. I haven't looked at a Wharfdale speaker in a lot of years. Of course, we always recommend the elevation, the prime elevation. There's a clip option that looks a lot like that. So if
the
Wharfdale
wedge,
a little bit brighter.
The wedge options that various one has. Yeah, so prime elevation. Actually, Aperion Novus is another candidate. They've got that wedge option, and ELAC with their OW42s. Assuming the Wharfdales are something close to a neutral sound, then any of those are definitely candidates. Prime elevation, ELAC, OW42s, Novus, the wedge on walls that they have. Ascend's HTM 200 SEs potentially. Those are 6 inches deep and do need some kind of bracket to hold them, so probably would stick down from an on ceiling a little bit more than you would want to. But all of those wedge shape ones can get mounted pretty easily, and because they have the wedge shape, sometimes they don't look so out of place on a ceiling. So those are 3 good options.
All right, we already answered that question. I didn't realize we were doing that. I didn't know they were separated out. So what receiver options with at least 5.2.4? Well, it does depend whether or not you want to power everything with your receiver. So there's that to consider,
you almost get it automatically because anything that can go up to 9 speakers pretty much has 9 amps built in, other than the Anthem that we talked about last week. So our recommendation would be wait. Because if you can wait, we do expect there will be some new AV receiver models announced for 2021. We don't know when. It might be delayed, but something will come out eventually. So if you don't even know what room these are going in yet, then just wait. Because if something gets announced, great. If you're just like, I want to have something on my spreadsheet as a placeholder, Denon's X3700H. There's not really much reason to look further than that, and that can definitely serve as your placeholder for the time being.
Right. So he's interested in an OLED, but 65 inches wouldn't be big enough, most likely. So any other TVs to keep an eye on for deals? So we just mentioned that one from Costco.
The Vizio. The Vizio P Quantum X, 85 inches for $2,500 at Costco. That is the deal of deals as far as size, and some pretty darn good, impressive performance from anything other than an OLED. So of course you're going to keep an eye on the 77 and 83-inch OLEDs. Those are definitely going to be more than $2,500. Although that's the 77 inches, they are coming down in price. The starting prices this year, I think it's $3,500 for the 77 inch for like the C1. So it's barely more expensive than the closeout prices on the C10. And come lower prices a little bit later in the year, I think that thing's getting under $3,000 this year. So, yeah.
So for his living room, it's an open concept space. He's got a 65-inch TCL 6 series they'll be using, but its built-in speakers won't cut it. They don't want a whole surround sound setup, though. He's thinking a sound bar. Is there any good option under $1,000 for a big open space, though? That becomes hard.
It does, and I wouldn't point you to a soundbar, but I do have an alternative.
Okay. What's your alternative?
Oh, okay. I'll hop right into it and say Klipsch. Klipsch has powered monitors that come with a remote. So you can use them as TV speakers. You can use them just like you would have used a soundbar, except these are a pair of self-powered Klipsch bookshelf speakers. Now, thankfully, the R15 PM, because the P is for powered, so the R15 PM, they're on clearance for $250 everywhere that they're sold right now. And that's a pretty good deal for speakers that can definitely play loud. Voices will sound clear. Will it be the end word on linearity? No, but I mean, compared to a soundbar, it's going to be superior. And they have a dedicated subwoofer output on the back of those powered monitors too. So you had $1,000 budget to start with. You can go ahead and spend the lion's share of that on your subwoofer and get some $250 Klipsch powered monitors. Now, if those sell out, then the version that replaced them was the R51 PM, not the R15 PM, the R51 PM, because apparently Klipsch decided that when they do a replacement, you just flip the numbers. But those are available for $380 for a pair, so $130 more. No reason to spend that if you can still get the R15 PM, because nothing changed besides a little bit of cosmetics. But yeah, if it sells out, you can still get those for under $400 and still have money left over to get yourself a nice subwoofer for your living room.
Okay, sounds good. I like powered speakers in these situations because it makes things a little bit easier, but plugging them in is also not the easiest thing in the world. So you're going to have to...
Well, there's only one, though. There's only one power cord, and then it's speaker wire that joins the left
speaker
to the
wire
right.
that joins the two? Okay.
So, I mean, you would have had to plug in a soundbar, right? So it's not really any different from that as far as power concerns.
Kevin has a 5.1.4 configuration. In terms of physical placement, his 4 overhead speakers would be top fronts and rear heights. Would it be more beneficial adding another pair of overhead speakers, 6 in total, or adding front wides? Which receiver models support front wides anyways, and do wides even work with Atmos? The way Dolby words things about front wides is very confusing.
Yes, it is.
So adding more speakers overhead would be great if you had the receiver to do it, but you probably don't, because it requires
anything that can do 6 overheads
can also do front wides.
Yeah, could alternatively do front wides, or it's going to be a 9.1.6 situation, which could end up doing both.
But that's not. I mean, that's not very common. Only the monoprice can do that. Isn't that right? The monoprice processor and Trinov, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so monoprice HTP1 processor can do 9.1.6. Anthem's MRX 1140 receiver. Okay. That one can do 9.1.6. You got Emotiva's options, which I wouldn't recommend getting, but they can do it. 9.1.6. And then there's all the things that are considerably more expensive than those from Storm Audio and Trinov and Adcom, etc. But yeah, those would be the
if
more
you have a normal
ones.
receiver that has it can do 7.1.4, you can't put 2 more of those on the ceiling.
You can't go and make it 5.1.6 and say that's still 11 speakers. Nope, they don't do 6 overheads.
They don't allow that. And they also won't allow wides. So
that's right. Yeah, so you have to go to Denon's X6700H. That is the current model. That will do 13 speakers total. So you can do 9, which would include your regular 7 plus wides and then 4 overheads, or you can do 7 regular speakers plus 6 overheads. You can do that with the X6700H. You can do it with the sister model that costs more, the Marantz SR8015. that can also do that. And then you've got the higher models, the older X8500H can still do it. And you've got the Marantz Pre-Pro, the AV8805 that can do it. So those are all the options there. Now, in terms of okay, so the first question first. Would it be better to have 6 overheads or to have 4 overheads and front wides? To me, it matters tremendously. What is your seating area? If you've got 3 rows of seats, then I would definitely go for 6 overheads in that scenario. I think that is going to be beneficial if you've got 3 rows of seats that actually get used. Okay, I'm not talking about I am always sitting in the front row and I'm the only person who cares in here, so I'm going to have 6 overheads. You don't really need it for that. But if you actually use multiple rows of seats, I would err on the side of 6 overheads. Otherwise, if it's 1 row of seats or 1 row is the only row that you really care about, I would probably stick with 4 overheads and I would add front wides because I like what front wides do. I think that makes sense there. If you're going to do that, I would encourage you to stick with Denon because at the moment, this goes to your last question about the way Dolby handles front wides. So originally, front wides were always something that could be used with actual Atmos soundtracks. Now, sound would only ever come out of the front wides if they happened to use object audio in the floor layer, and they happen to put an object with coordinates that line up with your front wide speakers. That's the only scenario where they would make a sound, but they could always make a sound with actual Atmos soundtracks. There's never been a restriction on that on anything that does Atmos. So anything that had front wides, if there's an object there, it would have played it. The restriction was on the Dolby Surround Up mixer. The Dolby Surround Up mixer originally would never put any sound into the front wide speakers. You would have to use DTS's up mixer, the Neural X up mixer, to upmix sounds into the front wides. But that has changed, but only for Denon and Marantz. Nobody else besides Trinov has done this, which is now they will put sounds into the front wides using the Dolby Surround Up mixer. That is a new thing, but yeah, other than Trinov, Dolby and Denon and Marantz are the only ones doing it. So I would definitely take a look at an X6700H if this is what you want to do, and then whether you go 6 overheads or front wides would depend on how many seats you got.
Right, and also the kind of the width of the room too for the wides. If your seats are real close to the side walls, or there's not that much room, wides don't make any sense to me. The 6700H on Accessories for Less, when it's in stock, which it is not, is a $400 off its normal $25.99 price tag. So it's $21.99. So that's a pretty hefty receiver for adding a couple more speakers. So if you don't already own something like this, you're talking about spending, a minimum of $2,500 just to,
and that is the lowest
receiver
price.
On sale.
There's nothing cheaper than that can do front wides or 6 overheads.
Yeah. So just so you're aware. Mark's theater is in a loft space, so it is open at the back to the stairs leading down to some other rooms, not an enclosed space. He appears to be running a 5.2.4. Appears must be from the pictures, but with 2 pairs of surround, since he has 2 rows of seats, and also 2 pairs of overhead speakers directly above each row, in addition to his front heights on his front wall. All the speakers are Revel. The floor and back row riser are fully carpeted, but other than that, his only acoustic treatments are 4 2-foot by 4-foot by 2-inch thick panels from ATS Acoustics. He mounted 2 of them on his left wall, although just eyeballing it, they don't appear to be at any specific reflection points, and they're mounted quite high. The other 2 went behind his 2 subwoofers, one near the front left corner on the front wall, and the other near the front right corner, but on the right side wall. The right wall has windows with curtains covering them, and the whole room is very white, including the speaker subs and projectors. Okay. And there's a full-size Spider-Man.
There is a full-size Spider-Man in there. I made sure to make that the first image you saw so that you wouldn't see just the silhouetted version and be like, who is that person standing there?
Right.
In front of
so
the projection screen?
On the front wall, the subwoofer is in front of a window, and he's put the panel between the window and the wall.
Yeah.
Right. And then on the, I don't know what's going on that side wall. There's a panel by that second subwoofer?
I mean, he described it. I don't see it in the image, but he probably moved it there without the picture showing it, so something like that. It looks like maybe in one of the other shots, it's actually on the back wall now, but like not behind any seat in particular. It's just kind of back there, possibly below the projector, in between his posters. I don't know. I can't see. Might be a pillow. I don't know.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. Yeah, that might be it. Whatever. Okay. So
yes, there's two definitely on the left side wall, but they're up fairly high. It looks like they're actually kind of like above the tops of his speakers, or just slightly close to it, and then not really at any particular reflection point. You just put them in between the posters that were already on the walls.
Right. So everything's up high.
Yeah.
So on that side wall. Yeah, I see it now. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's got decorations, and he's sort of trying to make us all make sense with the decorations that he's got going on. He would like to improve the sound in his theater. With it being open at the back, are acoustic panels even necessary? If so, what would you recommend? Where should he put the four 2-inch thick panels he already owns, and what more should he purchase, and where should he purchase them? So lower to begin with on the panel on your. It's hard to tell because you've got your speakers super angled.
Yeah.
So that's going to change sort of. Okay. What I would do in this room, let's start with that. The first thing I would do is I would take my speakers and aim them straight into the room from all the positions in which you have them. Okay. So your side surrounds look like, the first side surround on the left side looks like it's in front of the couch a little bit and facing directly towards the couch, so that when you're reclining back, the speaker would actually be in front of your ear. So I would take where my ear would be when my speaker is when I'm reclined, and I would put the speaker across the room from that, and maybe a little bit behind you. Yeah. And then I would have it firing directly straight forward, not aimed at your ear if it's a little bit behind. That side surround on the other side and on the back side, I would push just about on that back wall because I think it's too far forward. Yeah. Then my front speakers, I would aim directly straight into the room, and then I would start playing some like the side surrounds you don't have to worry about, but the front speakers, I would have them facing directly into the room, and then I would play some stereo 2-channel music in like direct mode or something to make sure that it's not getting mixed into any of the other speakers. And then I would start, doing some listening tests to have it to see what it sounded like as far as pans left to right, whether or not the vocals are anchored in the center, and just how it overall sounded.
And with Revels, you don't have to toe them in much. They have that exceedingly even off-axis dispersion, so you are not going to need a lot of toe in on those.
I would start with that and then see how it sounds, and if it sounds pretty good, then I would leave it at that. Then I would treat my first reflection points, which may in fact be that window on the right, the front window on the right wall or near it.
Going to be pretty close to it, yeah. So you might need a freestanding panels.
The other wall, it may be where your panel currently is. It'll be hard to tell until you do the mirror thing.
Yeah, I would expect it to be a little bit further forward, like closer to where the poster exists. So I mean,
you might want to just flip where the posters and the panels are, and then lower the panels down to like so that the panel that is, they're gonna want to be closer to the ground. I mean, I have mine about maybe 2.5 feet above the ground, maybe 2 feet above the ground, so that to make sure that the tweeter hits it.
Definitely,
because that's what you're really looking for more than anything. Yeah. And then if the woofers hit it, they do. If they don't, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I do think in this room you can use some treatment. I wouldn't go completely bare if I had my druthers. I would put something on the back wall. If you care about those back seats at all, they're right up against that back wall, and I would have something on that back wall. Like Tom, I would address the first reflection points. Like if we're looking at the left wall where you already have two panels, I would pretty much have those two panels side by side, like basically making a 4x4 square, because that's going to take care of the right speaker off the right wall and the left speaker off of the right wall, that second reflection that's going across the room first. So I would basically have like a 4x4 square, and I would get that, more centered on ear level, and maybe you got posters on either side of that, so you're not completely ruining the look of your room, but just changing the arrangement a little bit. But I mean, side wall, back wall, I'm less concerned about bass trapping in this room because that open nature means that, the pressure of the bass is escaping out of this room more or less, and I'm less concerned about heavy reflection of bass in this room. I would want to take a look at the dual subwoofer placement though, because the likelihood of this just working by happenstance is pretty low. Although with the room being open, we don't have your enclosed rectangle, so we can't say for sure, that somewhere particularly across the room is going to be great. However, we do know that you have a parallel left wall and a parallel right wall. So if you actually went for something closer to the midpoints of your two side walls, if that's something you could do, that has a good likelihood of at least addressing that mode that's going between your left and right wall. Otherwise, I'd rely on my 12-step guide and little by little trial and error adjusting the phase of one of the subs to try and get them playing in the best harmony. But yeah, I don't think we need to overdo it, but I would add a little bit more, particularly on the back wall. I would rearrange the arrangement on the left wall, and I would mirror that arrangement on the right wall, which would mean freestanding panels in front of your windows. But that would be my take.
Right. And as far as where to buy them, I would say as long as you're buying, Rockwool or Owens Corning fiberglass insulation, I would not worry about that. I would just say wherever you can get the right color for the cheapest price. So if GiK is that, then go to GiK. If Acoustimac is that, or whatever they're called,
Acoustimac,
then go there. But I would price it out all those places and then see what was the cheapest for me. And also, don't be afraid to maybe mix up the colors a little bit here. You've got
accent colors.
Yeah, there's. I mean, I'm not saying you have to go with a black panel, but having some colors that accent some of the other things you have going on, or a printed panel, is not a terrible idea. Just like I said, be careful the colors aren't going to maybe match. Ryan is building a dedicated theater room, and he's going to DIY for the subwoofers, or he's going DIY for the subwoofers. He is wiring up for 4 subs, 2 at the front behind his acoustically transparent screen and 2 at the back. His plan is to go with an 18-inch ported design for the subs at the front of the room, but the subs at the back of the room will require a smaller footprint. So what matters most when it comes to trying to match the rear subs performance to the front? Should he use identical 18-inch drivers even if the cabinets are different? If the rear subs are smaller all around, smaller cabinets and smaller drivers, will that wreak havoc on his bass response? What should be the plan? I would build 4 identical subwoofers.
Ideally, that is absolutely the ideal.
that having the bigger subs up front. I don't know what the point would be. I guess. Indeed. Because generally it's like I want to build bigger subs because I want more extension and more output.
Sure.
That's what the bigger sub gives you: more extension, which means it can play lower, and more output, which means it can play louder. So if you put smaller subs at the back, in order to level match them or to have everything play the same, the back subs and the front subs have to play the same volume, which means why did you build bigger ones that can play louder in a room that you won't use it? And if the extension is different, then the subs at the back of the room are going to stop playing at some point or start making
distorting
noise
as they attempt to keep up with the front subs.
And then you'll end up with
run into problems.
Bad performance.
Yeah. So I
would not do this.
One very very potential option, which would actually save you money, would be whatever is the maximum size that you can put in the back of the room, 2 more of those at the front of the room. Now you have 4 identical subs. They're not going to be as big as the original 18-incher ported boxes that could only physically fit at the front of your room and not at the back of the room, but we have 4 identical subs. And I don't know what kind of room you're building, but the chances of 4 15-inch DIY ported subs not being able to handle your room when you're building a dedicated enclosed theater, seems unlikely. It seems very unlikely that is going to be inadequate. Now, the other thing is, if it's strictly a matter of footprint, but you can go more vertical with the ones at the back,
Right.
then the cabinet doesn't have to be literally identical as long as the internal volume and the length and aperture of the ports are the same. So
right.
if you can make a smaller footprint but it's taller and the internal volume remains the same, that's fine. You can still have 4 effectively identical subs in performance. It's just that the cabinets are shaped differently. I mean, if you go over to JTR speakers, for example, they have multiple different versions of their largest sub, their 4000 ultra low frequency. They have multiple different versions, which is just different shapes and dimensions of the box so that it fits in different places, but the internal volume of all of those different configurations is the same. So that is certainly something you can do. I wouldn't opt for, I can fit these enormous 18-inch ported designs at the front, but there's no way, no how I can fit anything identical at the back. I wouldn't do that. It's not worth it. So what I would either
get a 12 or a 15-inch driver.
Downsize the fronts probably.
Yeah, get the box. And you can make something as tall as you want, right? I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Within the dimensions of the room.
You tell me. Yeah. So if the problem is footprint, then you can have a down-firing driver or a front-firing driver with a very tall, thin box, and then you get whatever output or whatever you want out of that.
That's right.
And then you build something similar at the front, which doesn't have to be tall and thin. It could be just a cube.
Yeah, and the great thing about DIY is that that option could very much be open to you. You're not limited to what is being offered by a particular brand. If you're like, I need the footprint to be smaller, then you make it taller, keep the internal volume the same.
Right. I guess the only thing I would be concerned about if you're DIYing this is if you are going to build 2 different size boxes or 2 different shaped boxes, to make sure that one box is not they're both braced similarly, so that you're not getting, if you have a long thin box with not much bracing, then the box itself is going to start to flex and then create noise. So in that case, I would maybe lean, it depends on what your woodworking skills are and math, because as you add bracing, you're reducing volume. So I would make sure that it might just be easier to make the exact same boxes 4 times than it is to try to make something quote unquote easier in the front when you don't have to. Brian is the fellow with the unfinished basement with part of the concrete foundation jutting in on the right hand side. He's decided to go with an ultra short throw projector, which apparently is something I can say today, so that's fun for me. What battery backup should he get to protect the Optima Cinema X P2 UST projector? He probably won't have any other devices that need battery backup plugged into the same unit. He saw that we recommended an APC gaming UPS on a previous episode, but he's seen bad reviews, including a mention of one catching on fire. Any suggestions? I would not worry about that one that caught on fire. That's what my suggestion is. And you worry if a whole bunch of them catch on fire. If one of them catches on fire, that's not so bad.
And also, I blame no one for potentially being confused by the exceedingly similar model numbers that APC has unfortunately given to a whole bunch of these. But we have been talking about the current ones, which are BR and then some number, which is the amount of volt amps that it can supply from the battery, and ending in BRMS. It ends in MS. So there's a BR1000 MS, a BR1350 MS, and now a BR1500 MS2 for some reason. But those are the ones that produce pure sine wave and will work with power factor correction PFC power supplies. And that might have been the issue, because there is a BN 1000 MS and a BN 1350 MS, and those are not the same thing. They are not pure sine wave, and when they get together with a PFC power supply, they don't always play nicely together. Usually it's the PFC power supply that has a problem, not the battery backup, but whatever. So BR is what you're looking for at the beginning there. If this is going to be just for the projector, I'd point you to the 1000. There's no reason to spend more. You're not going to need the additional wattage that the battery can supply, so I'd save the money. And for $160 over at BH Photo Video, you can get the BR1000 MS.
So, the thing to remember here is the only thing that you really have to power, you have to provide enough power for the projector to go through its cooling cycle. That's it. Because you're not going to keep it on any longer. Once the power flicks, it's going to shut itself down, because it almost always does. It doesn't click on fast enough. At least it doesn't in my home theater. Click on fast enough to keep the image going. So you let the power will immediately switch back on, which will allow it to go through the cooling cycle, And as it cools, then that takes 2-3 minutes, maybe 5 on the outside, and that's all you really need power for. So he says he's going to use clipped speakers that he already owns for the floor level. A neighbor of his has some brand new Yamo in-ceiling speakers that they've never used, and they're willing to give them to Brian. Any reason to avoid them as Atmos overheads? You don't have, as long as you don't have an exceptionally tall ceiling, which would have to be exceptionally tall.
Doesn't.
Which you don't.
Nope.
So what are some reasons not to pair speakers with clipped speakers? Tonal mismatch or timbre mismatches, which you don't have to worry about with Atmos because that's not an issue. But more importantly, level matching.
Sure.
So if you have a speaker that's very, that's equally far away as a clipped speaker, the clipped speaker will get louder with much less power than the other speakers, which means you might not be able to level match them completely. Neither of those things will be an issue for Atmos because they're closer to you than your clipped speakers will be, and it's not going to be an issue. So I would say this is fine.
Absolutely. I'd be totally fine with this. The price is certainly right, and I think you're absolutely fine getting those from your neighbor.
Right. He says the Yamo speakers don't come with back cans or backer boxes. Brian's ceiling has no drywall, so making his own backer boxes would be no problem. What size should they be? Are they even needed? Needed is strong, but yes, I would. We always prefer them, and it's because you can control how the speaker sounds, essentially,
and leakage to the floor above you.
Right. So if it has its own box, then you know exactly how much air is back there. So normally, what you would do, and I'm sure that if you haven't done it already, you can use either you look at the manual and see what the recommended size, or minimum or whatever. They'll have some sort of recommended cubic feet.
It's almost always 1 cubic foot of air.
Yeah.
That's almost always what in-ceiling speakers want is 1 cubic foot.
So you can do that, or you can contact the company and they'll tell you, oh yeah, this is what we would do, and this is how we would do it. Then you just basically, take some 2x or whatever and block it off and make sure that you've caulked in the seams, and then Bob's your uncle.
Some insulation inside of the back box is nice, just to remove the resonances like you would from any normal sealed speaker box, because that's essentially what you're building. It's possible. So in a basement, most places do not require you to have a back can or a back box in terms of fire safety, but some municipalities do. It never hurts to just call your city hall and find out if your municipality actually requires this. But regardless, we would recommend it. You won't necessarily buy them from ISO Store. ISO Store has their quiet box, which is a fairly nice design, but it's a little bit small. It's a little bit small for speakers. It was mostly designed for can lights, for recessed can lights, so it's that type of size. But if you just want to take a look at their design, that is something you could quite easily copy DIY and just make it 1 cubic foot inside and add some insulation in there, and that should absolutely do the trick.
Yeah, you keep cutting out on me.
Yeah.
So
Skype issues. All right.
Yeah. So the ducts for his HVAC somewhat limit where his in-ceiling speakers can go. Furthermore, the finished ceiling will be 7 foot 9 inches, so a little shorter than a normal room. He can put a pair 4 feet behind his main seats, but in front of his seats, they either need to be closer, less than 2 feet, or farther, about 6 feet. Which would be better? And should he maybe just go with a single pair of in-ceilings directly overhead? I do the 6 feet and call it a day.
Absolutely.
Bob's your uncle.
Yep, okay. Completely. Yeah.
2 feet's not enough.
Yeah.
2 feet's not enough. 6 feet's not too far. And going with a single pair when you can go with 2 makes little sense to me.
Completely agree. Yeah. Yep. I'd opt for the little bit farther away. No problem with that. I mean, front heights would go there anyway, and we're gonna get you to label them as front heights and rear heights anyway. Even though you might go, but the diagram says they should be called top rears. No. As far as the decoding is concerned, if you label them as front heights and rear heights, it's gonna steer everything as best as possible. Particularly with DTS. DTS is the one that does some weird stuff if you label them anything other than heights. So the label doesn't matter too much, and 6 feet is not too far. So that is absolutely what I would do, and I would not go down to only 2 overheads, because then you have no front to back steering. You only have left to right. So if you can do 4 overheads and 6 feet in front of you and 4 feet behind you, sounds very good to me.
Yeah. John. So John's Denon X4000 died, which is a great receiver. I had it. So he got an X3700H as a replacement, which also means he can do Atmos now.
Yeah.
He's got 7 Ascend acoustic speakers, CTM 340 SE up front, and HTM 200 SE surrounds and backs. What would be some good in-ceiling speakers to add to this setup to make 7.2.4 configuration? All the ones we already said.
Yeah, does Best Buy have the current deal for you? Hopefully you... Actually, you know what? I'm pretty sure I emailed John right away because I'm like, yeah, there's a Best Buy sale on the Sonat speakers. So I'm pretty...
maybe you already got them?
I'm pretty sure he already knows about this and got them. But for anyone else, as long as that sale is still going, or if it isn't, wait a little bit because it'll probably come back. Yeah, the Sonats in ceilings, the Mag 6s, plus their back cans. That'll get you to $200 for a pair. So that's what I would do all day long in this scenario.
Right. And then there's always the monoprice ones and everything else. They'll all be fine.
Yep.
They'll all be fine. Said the X3700H can power 9 speakers on its own. What should he get to power 2 more speakers? And should he use it to power his front left and rights or his top rears? He sits 12 feet away from his fronts. I'm going to say that you should use it to power your top rears. And the reason is because if we tell you to go ahead and have it power your fronts, you're going to end up buying a 579 channel amplifier because you're going to fall directly into the black hole that is the rabbit hole of shopping for amps. You're going to be upset
that the monoprice monoliths are currently out of stock, and you're like, why won't you let me spend $2,500 on an 11-channel monolith amplifier?
Which you don't need. So you're going to buy a 2-channel, like, Dayton Audio or audio amp or whatever the thing is these days. Just, it literally doesn't matter how much power it has.
Right. I mean, we had
50 watts is fine.
We had anecdotally those comments from Ken at the beginning of the podcast where he went with the Dayton APA 102 that we always recommended. And he, I don't know if it was pure bad luck. I don't know if they've had some kind of parts problem or whatever, but he went through 2 of them with problems and ended up with the Audio Source Amp 100 instead, which actually I used to always favor the Dayton because it was a little bit cheaper than the Audio Source Amp 100. Right now, the Audio Source Amp 100 is $5 cheaper than the Dayton. So no particular reason, but you could try either of those. They will definitely power your top rears. Absolutely fine. Just to throw the wrench into the works, I can mention Emotiva's Bass X A300. That gets up to $400.
Don't send it, pushing them in the rabbit hole.
I'm saying if you just can't tear yourself away from the idea of powering your front left and right.
You're not allowed to buy more than 2 channels. That's what I say.
It's not more than 2 channels.
That's what I'm saying. I know, but he's going to see it and go, well, if I get 2 channels, I should get
3.
Right?
And if I'm going to get 3, maybe I should get 5.
If I'm going to get 3, I might as well get 5. It's only another couple $100.
Right.
And if I'm going to get 5, why don't we get 7? What about those other ones? I'm telling you, I've been there.
Absolutely.
Don't do it.
But there you go. That's as far as you're allowed to go down the rabbit hole. Would be $400 for the Emotiva Bass X 300.
Andrew, by the way, it's pronounced Bass.
I know. Yes.
Okay. Andrew and his wife continue to steal the KEF LS50 speakers back and forth to buy another pair. Stop it. So they reach a compromise. They're not in the theater and they're not in his wife's office. They put them in the living room, but they can both enjoy them. That means Andrew is still considering new speakers for the theater. Please just buy another pair. He got to audition some Martin Logan Motion Series speakers and came away very impressed, but he's in no rush. He wants to audition lots of options and make a very informed decision. The Motion speakers say they use an AMT tweeter. What's the difference between that and a folded ribbon tweeter?
Trademark.
Marketing? I was going to say marketing, I think, is the difference there.
Yeah, AMT is Air Motion Tweeter. That was...
Because no other tweeter uses air. Just this one. Just the only one.
I'm just saying what the initialism stands for.
I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that this is the only one that uses air. Everybody else uses the power of positive thinking.
And that was under patent by Heil Audio, who invented it. Until that patent expired, and everybody could start making air motion tweeters, or the generic name of folded ribbon tweeters. And now a whole bunch of companies have, and they no longer have to pay licensing for the patent because that has expired now. So that is all it is. It is a trademarked name of the original patented design, but the generic name is a folded ribbon tweeter. They are effectively no different than an air motion AMT tweeter.
Could we go over some various tweeter designs so he has a better idea of what all the different tweeter brands are offering? Different speaker brands, sorry. He tends to focus on the higher frequencies when he's listening critically. He wouldn't want any harshness, but he'd want a lot of detail and smoothness. So what should he be looking for in a tweeter? I'm I wouldn't look at the tweeter.
Yeah, because there are
so,
a million and one ways to skin this cat.
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry about what the design of the tweeter was. I would just go in there and listen to all of them, because there's just so many. Diamond tweeters, beryllium tweeters, magnesium, beryllium, hybrid
and then
tweeters.
You can put them in a waveguide, you can put them in a horn, you can put them in a compression configuration, you could make them coaxial, you could make them concentric. Yeah, there's a gazillion different ways that you can come at these things. And I mean, so if you're talking about something like, let's say, a coaxial design, inherently there's going to be some factors of intermodulation distortion. There is no way that you can avoid that the wave that is produced by the woofer that is literally directly behind that tweeter, there's no way that there's not going to be some wave interaction, particularly where those two drivers cross over to one another. That is going to be like an inherent characteristic of positioning your speaker that way. But there are better and worse implementations of that. If you look at the concentric designs that Kef and Andrew Jones over at ELAC and what he was doing before with Pioneer, if you look at those designs, those tend to address the idea of a coaxial, in this case concentric, where they share the exact same plane in that tweeter's surround. It addresses a lot of those things with how the crossover is designed. But yeah, there's going to be some things with intermodulation distortion, but then you get the benefits of exceedingly even dispersion in all directions, including vertically. So then you look at something like a waveguide or a horn, that's going to affect the directionality of the speaker, but you can have tremendously different results depending on the design of that waveguide or that horn, including maybe you limit the vertical dispersion, but allows for wider horizontal dispersion that better matches the mid-range driver. There's how it pairs to whatever mid-range driver they're using as well. So yeah, I mean, you can't just say it as simply as, okay, this has a ribbon tweeter, therefore it's going to be better. It's like, no, there are some really bad ribbon tweeters, or there are some good ribbon tweeters that are then implemented poorly. Yeah. There's a little ribbon up at the top, and then the next drivers are like a pair of 10 inches down at the bottom, and like those have to join each other somehow, and it just doesn't work.
And there's speakers out there that I know for a fact have nothing but a resistor between their tweeter and
or usually a capacitor, but one
or
component.
Capacitor, yes, right.
One component
one
as the
thing
crossover.
between the amplifier and the tweeter, and people will rave about how good this tweeter sounds. I'm like, I don't think you know what you're talking about, because I mean, it sounds fine, but it's certainly not. It's a 25-cent tweeter with a capacitor in that's it. Just as a low, basically a high frequency cutoff there. So, or whatever, pass through, high frequency pass through. So, yes, this is one of my personal pet peeves, and I'm not coming at you at all about this. No. Is the idea that we can look at a speaker and somehow have an idea of how it's going to sound. We can't.
Yeah,
we can even if we were looking at the crossover and had breakaways of the box and everything else, it would still be very hard to know exactly how that speaker is going to perform. Yeah. If you were a speaker designer, I think you would still be, I don't know, I'm not going to let's plug it in and listen to it. I mean, I think that even with that level of knowledge, you would still want to hear it before you may need it.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you can talk about something that is like intrinsic to the material, like beryllium is going to be, if you made it the same thickness as any other of the metals that are commonly used in tweeters, it is going to be lighter. Like that is the property of that material. It doesn't necessarily mean that every beryllium tweeter, or especially how it's implemented, is better than, let's say, every aluminum tweeter, because if you design the damping correctly, if you design the crossovers, if you maybe put in some like low pass, which would be like really, really high, but if you design that in, then the intrinsic benefits of beryllium as a material don't necessarily mean that it performs better. A great example is like what Seas did with man-made diamond. Man-made diamond isn't necessarily intrinsically better, but they can deposit the man-made diamond in such a way that it has like self-damping properties that a natural diamond never would. So, I mean, there's all kinds of craziness you can do where the carbon fiber materials that, again, can be like man-made deposited in particular patterns that start getting into metamaterial, properties of these things, which that's real stuff. So, it's very difficult to say that anything is inherently better. If it's designed and implemented well, it can work really, really well.
Okay. I will say, though, that so when you're going in there to shop for speakers, I did write an article about how to shop for home theater speakers. And one of the things is you got to really watch out for the psychology that they use on you when you're in there. So be aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then combat it in any way that you can so that you can actually hear these things. And in the end, you're going to want to take them home, even if that means, hey, what's your return policy on these bad boys? Because and ask about restocking fees, because you want to hear them in your house where you can spend some time with them before you decide that these are your forever speakers.
Yeah, because one thing to be wary of is the, I listened to these speakers in a store and was immediately impressed, because sometimes that means it's actually not neutral at all.
Right.
There's something about it that is like purposely standing out, and it gets your attention. You're like, ooh, I haven't heard a speaker sound like that before. But if you listen to it long term, then you're like, oh, it's because it's got this crazy 3.5 kilohertz hump that none of my other speakers have ever had.
Well, so, I think that clip speakers in particular benefit from this because they're very active at the top end, and when you sit in a room and you listen to them for the first time, they're very engaging for the first 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes.
Lots
and then,
of detail, right? Yeah.
Right. Then you get them home and you're like, after every movie, you have to take an Advil. Well, that might not be the case for you. And people love clip speakers. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with clip speakers, but their particular timbre, their particular voicing is such that, on the short term, they're very engaging, but for the long term, then they're not for everybody. So spending that time is going to make a big, big difference for you. Jack says, we mention accessories for less all the time and basically always recommend getting a refurbished AV receiver from them. But what about refurb external amps? Accessories for less list a few, Yamaha and Marantz models mostly, but a very limited selection. And they really aren't that cheap. Is there somewhere to go for great deals on external amps? He isn't finding a lot of options, even on the used market. Yeah, amps are tough because they don't die and they don't go obsolete.
Yeah, and even if you're not using one right now, very few people get rid of it because they're like, well, I might use it in the future.
Right, yeah, you never know. It's like Atmos comes around and you're like, I can't believe I got rid of that amp.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yes, used market on amps is not great. Yamaha and Marantz amps in general are not cheap to begin with, so going to accessories for less to find a deal on them, it's a deal, but it still doesn't beat what you might be able to get at mono price.
Anywhere near as many of them as they do their AV receivers, not even remotely close in numbers.
So getting a deal is hard if you don't know somebody. Yeah. So I don't really have a solution for this, to be honest with you.
I don't have a great website to point you. No, I really don't.
eBay.
Yeah. Audiogon, man. Audiogon would be where I'd be looking. And AVS Classifieds. Those would be the places.
Some of the manufacturers, too, have forums where they're going to have people trying to put stuff up there for sale, maybe.
Well, I guess maybe Emotiva would. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's wondering about external amplification because his front three speakers are all 4 ohm and list their sensitivity at 86.5 dB, but using a 2.83 volts at 1 meter. Does he have the math correct? Because they're 4 ohms. If it were 1 watt at 1 meter, they'd be spec'd at 83.5 dB. I'm not doing math on this podcast. I've made that mistake once. I'm not doing it again. Rob's already crunched the numbers.
Yeah, so you got that right, because the 2.83 volts is useful, because then irrespective of the impedance of your speaker, you're sending in the same signal. That is why that 2.83 volts is often used. If you were putting it into an 8 ohm load, that would result in 1 watt. If you put it into a 4 ohm load, it results in 2 watts. Yes, if you then cut that wattage in half back down to 1 watt, you would lose 3 decibels of output. So you have that math correct. With 1 watt, you would be getting 83.5 dB at 1 meter away from your 4 ohm speakers.
So as he's sitting 14 feet away and the speakers are also behind an acoustically transparent screen, he doesn't usually go right up to full reference volume. -10 is more typical for him. His Marantz SR6014 is managing, but he sort of feels like he's on the edge at that point, and it's kind of a space heater. It's warming up.
Yeah.
So could we help him understand why the efficiency and wattage topics, and does he fall into the camp where an external amp for his front speakers would genuinely make sense? You are on the cusp there, yeah. So your receiver is heating up, which tells you that you are. It's definitely getting to the point where it's running out of power, or getting close to that. At a -10 on the dial, that's not atypical for me either. Like with certain sources, especially ultra HD Blu-rays and Blu-rays and stuff like that, I might find myself up at -10, usually more like 13 or 15, but I might go as high as -7, -5 on movies like Thor, the one without the bass, where I keep looking for the bass.
Ragnarok.
That's it. I keep bumping it up, trying to get the bass to play. So are you somebody who could use? Probably. The acoustically transparent screen shouldn't be making a difference.
It can sometimes make like a 1 or 2 decibel difference, which it's not absolutely nothing, but it's not super significant. But I mean there's some fairly easy math, rule of thumb math that you can go with, which is you're just a little over 4 meters away from your speakers. So if you start at the 1 meter and then you double that to 2 meters, if you were in a wide open field, you would lose 6 decibels of output for every doubling of your distance. So you would theoretically in a wide open field be losing 12 decibels from, let's start at 83.5 dB with 1 watt going in there. But in a room where there are some reflections and some room reinforcement, it's usually, if it's a small room, you're usually only losing like 4 decibels. Maybe you're going to be 4.5, 5 if you're in a larger room. It's not going to be the full 6. But let's say you're losing somewhere in the range of 8 to 10 decibels just from distance. So with 1 watt going into your speakers, you're going to be somewhere in the range of 73 to 75 dB, which is, that's the test tone that comes out of your speakers for setting your SPL levels, but that's where you are. If you wanted to get, in his case, he wants to get up to peaks of about 95 dB instead of 105. If you're at the -10 point, that's where you normally are. For every 10 decibels that you go up, you need 10 times as many watts. So you are legitimately using maybe 100 watts to hit those 95 dB output levels that you're going for. If you wanted to get to 105 dB in your scenario, you'd need 1,000 watts just for a very short-term peak, but mathematically that's where you're getting to, which is why it makes sense. The SR6014, it's capable of, it's not like a massive powerhouse. If it's driving multiple speakers, it's going to be able to put out about 50, 60 watts quite comfortably. And you are realistically potentially asking for 100 watts here and there. And so, I can understand that you're right on the cusp. Mathematically, it is not out of line for you to get an external amp, but you don't have to go nuts. All right. If you get a 100 or a 150 watt amplifier to handle your front 3 speakers that are absolutely taking the lion's share of that power from your AV receiver, you're right there. You don't need to go beyond that. You do not need a 1,000 watt amplifier. You've described that is not the scenario that you're using. But it does make sense that you might need a little bit more to comfortably and coolly power what your Marantz is doing now. Your Marantz isn't shutting itself down, but it's getting there. It's getting on the verge. So I think you're justified mathematically to do it. You don't have to go nuts. 100, 150 watts is what you need.
Okay. Joe was happy to hear that Rob got to try out James's Anthem MRX 740 receiver in person. Joe recently got the MRX 1140. He likes some confirmation about some of the settings. Once you figure out the network connection, everything is set up within a chosen profile. The basic speaker settings actually seem pretty straightforward, but he hasn't tried running Arc Genesis yet. Is there anything that immediately jumps out as being something he should be aware of, or does he just go with automated setup procedure, or with the automated setup procedure, or does he need to dig into the professional options? So I don't know. I need to go, Rob.
Yeah. So I mean, the first thing I would get you to do is just go to YouTube and search for Anthem Arc Genesis tutorial, because there are a couple of really quite good ones there, including directly from Anthem themselves and from Audioholics, where Gene dug into Arc Genesis a little bit there on that professional side, some of the tailoring that you can do in there. So those are useful. Have a look at those. The thing that stood out about Arc Genesis to me is that if you want, so I would kind of say it's one or the other. Either run the automatic and then just put your blinders on and don't look at it too much or any videos on YouTube too much, and just be like, yeah, all right, it did its job and I'm leaving it alone. Because
that's what I would do.
The somewhat minor issue, I would say, and this is more or less a comparison coming from a Denon Marantz, let's say, or a Yamaha for that matter. With those ones, you can make some simple settings changes after having run Odyssey or after having run YPow. For example, if you discover after the automated setup that you would like to raise or lower the crossover of a given speaker, you can go ahead and do that. You can't do that with Anthem. You have to establish what your crossovers and curves are going to be before you run it, if you're doing the professional setup, or you have to leave it alone. You can't make small, simple adjustments after the fact. You have to do that stuff beforehand. So that's why if you look at like Gene's tutorial, if you know what you want the response to be and you tailor that into your target curve before running Arc Genesis, including if you want to alter where the crossover point happens between your speaker and subwoofers, you need to take care of all that beforehand. That's really the tip. It's not bad or good. It's a little bit different than the way if you're coming from, let's say, Odyssey, but it's something to be aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's got some Paradigm subs that came with their own perfect bass kit, which I think is Odyssey, isn't it? No. Yeah.
It's Anthem Room, correction.
It's Anthem, okay.
Yeah.
I keep getting confused with that and the thing that SVS used to offer, that one box that
way back in the day.
The back in the day.
They don't have that anymore.
Perfect bass kit, which if I just kept reading would have said which is the same as Arc. Should he run that separately on all the subs and then run Arc Genesis on the receiver? I don't see why you would.
No.
But I guess you could.
Yeah.
I don't see why you would.
No, you want one instance of having run Anthem Room Correction, and that'll be in the receivers. So yeah, you can put away the perfect bass kit part of your Paradigm subs. You're gonna just do it once inside of the receiver.
So were there any settings in the web interface that he ought to pay special attention to?
So I didn't know about this. This was from one of the tutorials that I glanced through. And yeah, there's kind of an important one, which is in the general section, under the display, there's a thing for no signal power off. This is, your typical thing that you would look at if no signal is playing, that it's going to put itself into standby after a given amount of time. Well, yeah, that apparently goes and powers down the entire AV receiver, even if some music is playing. So you basically want to turn that to never. And then there's the CEC settings, which I would recommend just turning off.
There you go. For listening modes, Joe just wants each type of signal played back as is, no upmixing. He knows that if he set the default auto mode for each input in the web UI to none, it seemed to work exactly the way he wants. 2-channel played in stereo, 5.1 used the appropriate decoder, and nothing more. Atmos was in Atmos. So is that the correct way to do it, or is there supposed to be an auto setting for the listening mode? None seems like a strange label. If it's working, don't touch it. That's what you do.
Yeah, that's all it is I'm not sure why they labeled it none. They could have, I don't know, maybe Yamaha has a trademark on the word straight or something, but or direct is, I don't know, not allowed to be used, but no, that's all it is. If you do anything else, then it will attempt to apply the given upmixer that you've selected to all incoming signals. None just means I'm just gonna play this as it is, and that's what you want it to do, so leave that at none.
So Rob mentioned Dolby volume. He couldn't find any mention of it anywhere within the web UI. He doesn't actually want it turned on, and he wants all of his audio signals to remain unaltered. There's a button called Dyn, D-Y-N, on the remote, and that seemed to bring up the off movie music and night settings that Rob talked about. So is that it? If he wants it off, just press that button, the dine button, and make sure it says off, question mark?
Yeah, James discovered that when I was over at his place, because I knew Dolby Volume was in there. It's mentioned in the manual, and you're correct. It shows up nowhere in the web interface. I'm like, that is a setting I apparently cannot adjust in the web interface. But yeah, on the remote itself, it's not in the, like, if you press the setup button to bring up all the menus on the front panel, it's not in there either. It is only via that dine, the dynamic button on the remote, and it just cycles between off, movie, music, and night mode. And if you want it off, set it to off, and that is it. It is mentioned in the manual. It is in the manual, but that is the only way to get it, which is weird, but there you go. Anthem.
Okay. Zack. Zack has been using his 67-inch DLP rear projection TV since 2008. He already had the DMD chip replaced once because it had developed some stuck mirrors.
Digital micro mirror device, DMD.
All right. That has started to happen again, and the lamp is so dim at this point, he refuses to try and find parts for it. So this is the year he'll get a brand new 77-inch OLED.
Woohoo!
All right. Congratulations.
Yes.
His AV receiver is a Denon X4300H, and he's running 5.1.4 Atmos configuration with it. He'll be getting an Xbox Series X. So does he need to get a new receiver at the same time as his new TV? Need is a strong word.
Indeed.
Your TV will work. Your speakers will work.
Yes.
It will not pass through all the things.
Yeah.
That will be the problem.
If you want all the things, then you're going to end up needing a new receiver. Because, so you can get all the video things by plugging the Xbox Series X directly into your new OLED, but your X4300H does not have eARC. It just has regular ARC.
Right.
So you can absolutely send back 5.1 Dolby Digital or 5.1 DTS. You can send back 2 channels of PCM, but you would not be able to send back 7.1 PCM. You would not be able to send back the Dolby Atmos bit stream that works over eARC but won't work over regular ARC.
I would live with that. I'm going to be honest with you.
Right.
I would live with that until the new receivers came out that had more functionality.
We've still got all kinds of glitches. Like if you try to use all the video things like 4K at 120 hertz with VRR, the audio is glitching on Xbox Series X's. And if you just leave it at 5.1 Dolby Digital, it all works just fine. So that might actually turn out to be not only what you can do, but also the most stable selection for this time. Like I've left my Xbox Series X in Dolby Digital 5.1, and I rely on my op mixer because trying to set that thing to Dolby Atmos bitstream output, I'm like, why does my center channel keep disappearing? Let's not deal with that anymore. So yeah, 5.1 Dolby Digital might be just fine. But if you're like, no, I just want all the lights to light up, I want 4K 120 and VRR, and I want Dolby Atmos, well, then yes, you will need a new AV receiver.
That's right. So he prefers to use the Chromecast with Google TV for his streaming services. Will that need to be plugged directly into the new TV? Will he need to use eARC? Will he be forced to use the apps that are built into the TV for any reason? Well, no, yes, and no. You can, you can plug it directly into the TV, or you haven't seen any reason why you can plug it directly into your receiver. You just pick an HDMI input, plug it in there.
The one thing that probably won't work plugging your Chromecast with Google TV into your X4300H, so this is assuming you do not get a new AV receiver. If you get a new AV receiver, you can definitely plug your Chromecast into your AV receiver, and then the receiver will feed the video onto the television. But if you do not upgrade, your X4300H will pass along HDR10. You will not be going beyond 4K 60 with a Chromecast with Google TV, so it'll pass that along just fine. But with Dolby Vision, it will pass along a Dolby Vision signal, but probably not the 12-bit 444 version of Dolby Vision, which some streaming devices, like when they go into Dolby Vision mode, that's what they do. They do 12-bit 444 and nothing but. I'm not actually sure what the Chromecast with Google TV does. There's a possibility you could get a black screen if you try to use Dolby Vision with it. That is a possibility. It's not necessarily the case, but I'm just not sure. But by and large, you would plug your Chromecast with Google TV into your AV receiver. That would be the way to come at this.
So he also ended up getting an NVIDIA Shield Pro pretty much exclusively for Plex. That was because even though Atmos works fine on the Chromecast for any of the streaming services, for some reason, it wouldn't output Atmos or DTS:X from his Blu-ray backups in Plex. So what's up with that? What's up with you still using the Chromecast when you have an NVIDIA Shield Pro? That's my question. I mean, you could do all the other things.
I mean, maybe YouTube with HDR, because the NVIDIA Shield Pro doesn't do YouTube with HDR, and the Chromecast with Google does, and maybe automatic frame rate switching, because for some reason, that
still doesn't
Pro
make any sense to me. It's a
still
computer.
can't get a handle.
Somebody go over there and do a firmware update. It's a computer.
I mean,
fix it.
It does it with Plex, because the Plex app itself on the NVIDIA Shield Pro has its own automatic frame rate switching, and that works. But on a system level, that still doesn't work. The audio side of things, I think the Shield is still the only one that will actually do full lossless output.
Right.
Because like Apple TV 4K won't do it. None of the Rokus will do it. The Chromecast won't do it. So that's the limitation, because you're not talking about Dolby Digital Plus with an Atmos extension. That's what all the streaming services are using. That's why that works on your Chromecast. It's Dolby Digital Plus with an Atmos extension. And that does work, but Dolby True HD with an Atmos extension, nothing else is supporting it. The NVIDIA Shield is the only game in town that's supporting it. That would be the case if you tried to use the built-in apps on your new LG OLED as well. The built-in Plex app on that won't take Dolby True, even though the TV can decode Dolby True HD, the Plex app on that won't. So, the NVIDIA Shield Pro is the right way to come at that. And there is, with those devices on hand, no reason that you'll need to use the built-in apps of your LG.
Right. Dave is going to be moving to Japan. He's excited about the opportunity, but it also means a big move in downsizing. His place in Japan will be a 1,400 square foot townhouse. He'll be sharing one wall with a neighbor, and it's an open concept living room, dining room, kitchen, and entrance on the lower floor where he will have his main AV setup. He wants a setup in the master bedroom and a nice headphone setup for his hi-fi man HE4XX.
That was the mass drop version. It was the 4XX. Yeah.
Whatever. So he's trying to decide what to take with him and have shipped over, and what to get rid of, and what to put in long-term storage. He has downsized before and regretted letting go of certain items back then. He moves quite frequently. So when he gets back into a bigger place at some point, he doesn't want the very thing he needs to be something he got rid of. So these are the things I guess he's got. Yeah. He's got, for TVs, he's got a 65-inch LG B8 OLED and a 55-inch 1080p OLED plus two Panasonic plasmas. He's thinking sell the two plasmas, bring the two OLEDs to Japan, ? So before we go any further, the power. What's the power like in Japan, and does it matter?
It's 100 volt. Half the country is 50 hertz, half the country is 60 hertz. So
isn't that convenient?
It depends on exactly where you are, and almost all the plugs in Japan are 2-prong, not 3-prong. So
okay.
Yeah.
So here in the States we are 120/60.
Yes.
So if you're in the 60 side,
many devices that work in North America do work in Japan. Particularly, most of the 2-prong devices will work in Japan. But yeah, you got to be a little bit careful, because not everything will, although they do have converters.
Right. There's converters and step-up transformers and stuff like that if you need to do that. So, but those can be noisy, and
they can.
Whatever. So I got no problems with them selling the plasmas. The plasmas are old enough that.
I think it's time. The one question I'm like, bringing the B8 OLED for the living room completely makes sense. I wouldn't replace that. The 55-inch 1080p, I'm like, is it time to go 4K there? Although I know coming up he has some AV receivers, one of which doesn't handle all the 4K stuff. So if you just stick with the 1080p OLED in the master bedroom, that'll be easy enough. And OLEDs are very thin and light. So rather than buying a new one over there, I don't know. Look into how much it's going to cost you to ship it over, because buying a new one over there might be just as cheap as shipping what
I'm going to assume that this is a choice that is being made for convenience and for long term, and that he's not actually paying for the shipping.
I don't know.
That's what I'm assuming. His job is shipping them out there.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to worry about how much it costs to ship something, but if that is in fact the case, then you could consider some other things. AV receivers: an entry-level Denon E300, an Denon X4000, and Denon X3500H. He's also got a Yamaha S201 stereo receiver that he's been using for his hi-fi man headphones, but it would be a bit big for the place in Japan. where his headphone setup will just be on a nightstand. So what should he bring, sell, or store?
I think you bring the two higher end Denons because the 3500H will pair nicely with your B8 and your 4000, which is the one that doesn't do all the 4K HDR stuff, but that'll pair nicely with your 1080p OLED. And then, I think you can bid a fond farewell to your two other receivers, the Denon E300 you really don't have a use for, and it's very easy to get an entry-level receiver if and when you ever need a third setup. I'm not worried about that. And the Yamaha stereo receiver, I mean, I don't know. Is it going to cost you more to store it than to buy one again if you need one? I think it would.
I mean, yeah, if you've got I stored a bunch of stuff on the floor behind my parents' couch in their home, in their theater area. So, yeah, if you do that, when we went to Australia, when we did it, then maybe, but I might just get rid of both those two. For subs, he's got two SVS PB1000s and one Focal Cub 3. Mm-hmm. With the open concept on his lower level, he's trying to figure out what he should do on the subwoofer front for his main system. He doesn't want to give up bass performance, but he'll have a neighbor to consider, and pressurizing the entire townhouse might be a challenge. With the more limited space, he was considering getting a pair of SB1000 Pros, but now the 3000 Micros could be an option. What do we think? I'd sell all these and get the micros, I think. And even then,
SB2000 Pro, well, same price. So yeah, I guess the 3000 micros make a lot of sense, don't they?
And this is the perfect example. It's like he's not going to pressurize the space. You just don't want to do that, especially if you're sharing a wall with somebody.
Yeah, and the lower level is open to the upper level, so you are talking about the entire townhouse if you're trying to do it.
So getting the small subs in a small space makes the most sense.
It really does.
And especially, and we're not worried about that sub 20 hertz performance because, frankly, he may not even be able to turn them up loud enough to even enjoy that.
If you look at the SB2000 Pros, like they're not huge honking things. So if you just want the number to say 20 on hertz on it, because the price is no different and the size isn't that different. So yeah. 601, half a dozen of the other, as far as I'm concerned, SB2000 Pros or 3000 Micros. But yeah, like PB1000s.
I'm not taking those PBs.
Those are some big honking subs to bring over.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to just keeping the Focal Cub 3 around for the master bedroom because that's small enough and easy enough.
Yeah, I guess I could see that, but
you could get better performance from an SB1000 Pro though. So yeah, if you want to like ditch all the subs you have and buy 3 new SVSs, you could do that.
Oh yeah, that Cub 3 is a $270 sub on Amazon, and it goes down to about 40 hertz. So it's bigger than the 3000 Micro.
It is, yeah. And it doesn't play anywhere near as low. So
nowhere near.
So yeah, for $500 you could get a 1000 Pro and definitely outperform your Cub 3. So there you go. If you're willing to do all that, we could get
the Cub 3. I think the low point at minus 60 dB is 32 hertz.
Right.
So not quite
it's a 40
performance
hertz
of the other one. Okay, that's what we do. For speakers, he's got some RBH Classic, Signature Classic 661 SE fronts, which are LCRs. Or he's got them from left. You got the left, center, and right version up there, and 66 SE surrounds, which are trapezoidal bipoles. A 5-speaker Little Bird and Little Bird set from Focal, and then a pair of EMP Tech E3B satellites, and a pair of more than short MS 908 towers that he's had for 20 years and sound great. Okay, so those are the ones you're going to store.
Yeah.
So he just needs 2 5-speaker setups for his place in Japan. The more in short towers have sentimental value, and the MP Tech satellites are very small. So he puts them in the long-term storage. How concerned should he be about the rubber surrounds and the woofers potentially degrading, or any other long-term storage concerns? Well, it depends on what kind of storage you're putting it in. Is it air-conditioned and stuff like that? Because that's going to make a big difference. Rob, I'm running real close to out of time here.
Understood.
So if you're going to put these in storage and you can't put them in somebody's house, then I would spring for the extra to make sure that it's temperature controlled.
Right.
Because that'll help you out. That doesn't guarantee. I don't know how long you're going to be in Japan, but you come back 10 years later, you might have to replace the surrounds, but it's still going to be cheaper than buying new speakers.
Yeah, I mean, for the one pair of Mordaunt shorts that you care about, like, do you have a friend who could store them for you that you trust would keep them in reasonable condition? Because I mean, if you just go for one of the mass storage places, I'm like, I don't know, it's probably not going to be very well climate controlled. But One pair of speakers. Yeah, if you can get those stored at somebody's house. The RBHs you can take with you. The birds and little birds are a great setup for your master bedroom. So that's where I would come at that. And yeah, Tom, if you need to skip out, I could just finish this question and sign off.
Yeah. So the surrounds, though, the trapezoidal bipoles,
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, they're fine.
Or you think you'd maybe bring the EMP techs as their surrounds instead?
And I would take those as surrounds instead, and I might even sell the trapezoidal ones, because I don't necessarily think that in the end you're going to want, if you're going to upgrade to Atmos, these are not the optimal speakers for that. So you might be able to just sell these, take the 5-speaker little bird combo for your bedroom, take the RBHs and the EMP techs for your main room, and put the Morton Short towers in storage. Oh my God, this keeps going on.
I know. That's why I was saying.
I gotta go.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, guys. I apologize, but I have a child I need to take.
He's got a hard out.
I got a hard out at 2:00, and we started a little bit late because I was writing. So, I guess. Have fun, Rob.
There you go.
Don't take too.
That was
don't
Tom
answer
Andrew
all
for
the
AVRant.
questions. That's me, Tom Andrew. All right. Bye.
Alrighty, take care. So I'm switching over to just me here on this, and I guess I will hang up our Skype call. Bye, Tom. So there we go. Okay, let me just move around a few things on my screen here so it makes a little bit more sense. So we are continuing on with David, and I will finish out his questions here. So we just did the speakers. Now streaming devices. He says he's got a 2015 NVIDIA Shield Pro, a PlayStation 4, a PlayStation 4 Pro, a whole bunch of Chromecasts, including one Ultra and one Audio, and one with Android TV, not the new Google TV version, the older one that was Chromecast with Android TV. And then he has a whole bunch of Rokus, because some streaming apps are only on Roku because they have a huge wide selection that not everybody else equals. So which one should he bring? What to do with all the rest? Okay, so I mean, are you going to play both of your PlayStation 4s? Because, I mean, it could certainly make sense to bring one of those along. I would probably bring the Pro and probably sell the PS4, although maybe you want one both in the master bedroom and downstairs. Although, you're going to be over in Japan. Maybe you buy yourself a PlayStation 5 while you're over there. So I would probably bring one of the PlayStations at most. Your NVIDIA Shield Pro could be useful, probably only in the living room, because that's going to be where you care about 4K HDR stuff potentially. So yeah, I think you could do that. Bring that along. I mean, it's small, easy enough to bring along. The Chromecast, I'm definitely going to say bring the Chromecast Audio with you, because I'm thinking about that for your headphone setup. The other ones, I don't think you need. I mean, I don't know how much you could even sell them for these days. Maybe you give them away as gifts, or you just have yourself a moving garage sale, and if somebody offers you $5, you give it to them. Probably the same for the Rokus, although if you want a particular Roku for some service that is only available on Roku, then maybe you bring one or two of those along, but I see no reason to keep a whole bunch of them. Streaming sticks and that, I mean, they're so cheap already, and then they are just going to continue to evolve as we go along. So the idea that you're going to regret having given up some Chromecasts and Rokus, other than that Chromecast Audio, I would hold on to that one. But all the rest, I'm like, it's going to be so easy to replace, and I don't think you're ever going to regret having given them up. Even the PlayStations, like they say, maybe you just buy yourself a PS5 while you're over in Japan, and that replaces your PS4s. So yeah, that's how I would come at those. And absorption panels. He's got 4 GiK tri-traps and 6 do-it-yourself panels that he built. Does he pay to have those all shipped over to Japan with him? Because yeah, they're kind of big and take up space. So yeah, we don't know if your work is paying for you for your moving expenses. My honest opinion is I probably wouldn't bring the tri-traps along to your townhouse. The likelihood that you're gonna have a really good place to put those, that's a little questionable to me. And then if you did bring them and then you don't have a place to put them and you're gonna have to store them while you're in Japan, like that's gonna be a headache and a half. So I might seriously consider just throwing the tri-traps into storage. You could even sell them and then buy new corner bass traps if and when you ever move back or move to a larger place. That is certainly something I would consider. The DIY panels, if they're just your typical 2 foot by 4 foot by 2 inch or 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 inch or something like that, those are going to travel pretty easily and can probably find a home anywhere that you go. So I'd bring those along. The tri-traps I'd probably either store or sell. And then lastly, yeah, what should he do for powering his Hi-Fi Man headphone setup? Their sound is lacking, particularly in the bass if he just tries to power them from a phone directly. So they sound good when they're plugged into his Yamaha stereo receiver, but that's physically a bit big for a nightstand setup. So he's wondering if a dedicated headphone amp would sound better than his Yamaha anyway, and what would we recommend? So this is where I think that Chromecast audio is going to come in very handy, so that you have just analog outputs from your Chromecast audio. And I would go ahead and spend $99 to get a JDS Labs Atom headphone amplifier. Very small. I mean, you can pocket it and bring it on the plane with you, so no worries about the shipping. The $99 price tag I don't think is going to break the bank, and it's a wonderful headphone amplifier. Very low noise, very low distortion, sounds fantastic, but it is an analog input. It is not a digital to analog converter. It can't take a digital signal. It is analog input only, either stereo 3.5 millimeter or just your regular red and white RCA inputs. But if you have that Chromecast audio, then you can send an analog signal to it that will let you cast from your phone any streaming services that you might be using. And yeah, you could even put that into the 3.5 millimeter input, and then also plug in, if you have a separate, like literally a CD player or something like that, could plug into that Atom amp, and that'll power your Hi-Fi Man headphones really, really nicely for a very affordable price, and be very, very small, take up hardly any space. So I think that does it. Yeah, George's, I'll mention who's left on the list. George's question is definitely something that both Tom and I need to be here for, so this is a natural stopping point, as well as having reached about the 2-hour mark anyway. So George, you're on the list. Dwayne is on the list. Mick from Australia, who wrote to us on Facebook. We did put that question on there. Don S., Chris M., and Dylan C. Those are all the names that are on the list, as well as anything that came in on Monday or Tuesday, since I cut off the topic list on Sunday night. So there we go. We'll go back up to the top and thank our listeners of the week. Tom isn't here to do it, as he normally does, so I will sign off on his behalf. So yes, people who supported us financially, that would be our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the place to go if you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. So very thankful to our 124 patrons on Patreon. For anyone who might like to make a one-time donation, you can do that via PayPal. So easiest way, come to our website, avrant.com. On the desktop version of the website, on the right-hand side, there is a thing that says support AVRant, and that'll just take you to PayPal. So anyone who would like to do that, you can do that. And then, yeah, we got some lovely notes of gratitude and encouragement from Mark, Zack, David, and Dylan. So really do appreciate those. We appreciate everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. The place to do that is our email address, question@avrant.com. That is where we would very much like you to send your questions that you want answered on the podcast. So question@avrant.com. Well, there we go. I guess we can just sign off on that. On behalf of Tom Andry for AVRant, I am Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.